Our ancestors had no books, no priests, no science. So how did they end up believing in gods? Nobody handed them the idea. It grew slowly inside their heads. Once you see how, you can't unsee it. Think about it. Thousands of years ago there were no temples, no holy books, no robed men explaining anything. Just people, a fire, and a very dark forest behind them. So did ancient humans really pray to anything? And if they did, what were they praying to? Scientists have been digging into caves and skulls for decades. What they found is stranger than the Sunday school version. But first, what did God even mean back then? The word God comes loaded. You probably picture a bearded figure on a cloud, a temple, or a rule book. That version of God is extremely recent. Organized religion with priests and rituals is a few thousand years old. Homo sapiens has been walking around for 300,000 years. Writing itself only appeared 5,000 years ago. So, for 98% of our existence, there was no written prayer, no sermon, no scripture. Nothing on paper. And yet, our ancestors were not stupid. Their brains were the same size as ours, same wiring, same hunger. They watched storms crack the sky, watched loved ones stop breathing, watched the sun disappear every single night. Turns out, if you're a thinking creature in that world, you don't need a priest to ask huge questions. You just need a quiet moment. If this made you curious, subscribe. I explain things that fascinate me. The real question isn't whether they had religion. It's what a brain felt when first looking up at stars. Because here's the paradox that breaks the common sense story about where belief actually came from in humans. Most people assume religion is a fairly recent invention, something civilization cooked up to keep people in line. A tool of kings and priests, a control system. That's the modern take, and it sounds reasonable enough.
But the archaeology says something else entirely. Because we keep finding graves, very old graves, and they're strange. They're not just holes in the ground. Bodies laid out carefully, on their sides, knees pulled up like sleeping. Sometimes tools are placed beside them, sometimes food, sometimes flowers, arranged around the body with obvious deliberate care. In Shanidar Cave, in what is now Iraq, archaeologists found Neanderthal remains buried with clusters of pollen around them. Some researchers think flowers were placed on those bodies, 60 to 100,000 years ago, by Neanderthals, our cousins, the ones we are told were the dumb ones.
And there's more. Bodies covered in red ochre, a rust-colored pigment they had to dig up, grind down, and deliberately rub across a human corpse. Why? Not for warmth, not for food. The dead need neither. Something in that head was saying, this matters. Even now, this person still matters. Something in them was quietly reaching for meaning beyond the visible world. That's symbolic thinking. The earliest fingerprint of a mind suspecting the world doesn't stop at what you can touch. Something was going on in their heads. But a burial isn't a god yet. What triggered the leap? To understand that leap, you have to understand what kind of animal we are. A very weird animal. Somewhere along the line, evolution handed us two strange upgrades that turned out to be a package deal. The first was self-awareness, the ability to look at yourself and quietly know that you actually exist. The second was heavier, the quiet knowledge that one day, inevitably, you personally are going to die. Think about that combination. No other creature really carries it around inside their head the way we do. A deer runs from a wolf, but it doesn't sit around at night thinking about its own mortality. We do. Every human at some point wakes in the dark and quietly understands this all ends. That is a very heavy piece of software to run inside the body of a soft, fragile mammal. On top of that, our brains are pattern-matching machines, wildly overtuned ones, always hunting for hidden meaning. We are what scientists call a super predator, but the tool we actually hunt with is prediction. We see grass moving and instantly our brain asks, Is that just the wind, or is that a lion? A rustle in the grass could be nothing, or it could genuinely be the last sound you ever hear. Natural selection had a simple rule. Assume it's a lion and you're wrong. You look silly briefly. Assume it's just the wind and you're wrong. Congratulations, you're lunch. False positives cheap, false negatives fatal. So brains that saw agents everywhere, that assumed something was behind every rustle, survived and had lots of kids. Brains that shrugged and assumed nothing was there mostly did not. Their genes quietly dropped out of the pool. Scientists actually have a name for this quirk.
They call it the Hyperactive Agency Detection Device, or HADD. It's the reason you jump at a shadow in the hallway or hear a creaky floor and freeze. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. Assume someone is there, just in case. Scale that up. If a rustle could be a lion, then what's making the wind? What's making the thunder? What's making the river flood? Something must be doing it. Something you can't see. Something with intent. So the brain was primed. But primed for what exactly? Here's what our brain got primed for. The very first gods weren't gods in the way we think. They were spirits. Everywhere. In everything. The river had a mood. The mountain had a mood. The old tree by the camp was somebody. This is called animism. And it's probably the oldest religious instinct on earth. Older than any god.
Ancient humans didn't separate the natural world from the supernatural. For them, there was simply no line. If the herd came, the forest was pleased. If the storm came, the sky itself was angry. Every rock and stream and animal had a kind of inner life. You didn't worship it exactly. You lived with it. You bargained. You said thanks when the hunt went well, sorry when it didn't. We can see this thinking painted on cave walls. In Chauvet Cave, southern France, 36,000 years old. Horses, lions, rhinos, bison, drawn with the kind of confidence a modern artist today would honestly envy. And these caves go deep, pitch black. You'd need a torch just to see the painted walls. Nobody was living down there. People crawled into the dark on purpose to paint animals nobody would see. That's not decoration, that's ritual. And then there's the Lion Man, a small figurine carved from mammoth ivory. Found in a cave in Germany called Hollensteinstadel. The little figure is about 40,000 years old. The body is human, the head a lion. Somebody, in the last ice age, carved this creature. Sat down with a piece of bone and carved a creature that does not exist anywhere in nature. That is the moment a human mind stops copying reality and starts inventing it right in front of us. That is the very first mythic being we have evidence of. Half human, half beast, fully imagined. Around this time we also start to see shamans, the middlemen, people who supposedly could talk to the spirits. They go into trance, take strange plants, dance around the fire and come back with answers from the invisible. Not priests exactly, more like the tribe's specialist for spirits. Not one god yet, but many small ones. For most of our history, we lived in small bands, maybe 20, 30, 50 people. Everyone knew everyone. You didn't need moral rules on a stone tablet. You just needed to not annoy your neighbor, right there. Belief in spirits was personal, local and messy. Then, 12,000 years ago, something new happens – agriculture. People stop chasing herds and start planting seeds. They stay in one place. Villages grow, then become towns. Suddenly, the gods about a specific river or animal aren't quite enough. Now people need weather and rain. They need soil to keep working, fertility in the fields, in the animals and in themselves. Spirits get promoted. They become gods of harvest, gods of storms, gods of the moon. Gods with names, gods with power. Here's a fact that quietly broke a lot of textbooks. In Turkey, there's a place called Göbekli Tepe. Giant stone pillars carved with animals, arranged in circles. It's a temple, about 11,000 years old. That means it was built before farming, before villages, before pottery.
Hunter-gatherers dragged massive stones across land. They built a sacred site first, and only after that did settled life really take off in the area.
So maybe the old story is upside down. Maybe religion didn't appear because we had cities at all. Maybe cities appeared because we had religion. Maybe what first pulled strangers together wasn't food, trade, or safety. Maybe it was a shared belief in something bigger than the tribe. Big gods for big groups of strangers. And this is where the story gets uncomfortably close to us. With many people in one place, trust breaks. In a group of 30, everybody watches everybody. Cheating is hard. But in a town of 2,000 people, you can steal from a stranger and vanish. You can lie and never get caught. Small-scale morality doesn't scale. So something else has to step in. Again and again across cultures, one specific kind of god steps in. A god that watches you. A god that sees when nobody else does. A god that keeps score forever. Studies show when people feel observed, a poster of eyes, a camera in the corner, they cheat less. They give more. They break fewer rules. Now imagine the watcher isn't a poster, but a being reading thoughts, that never sleeps, that will punish you eventually if you take what isn't yours. That God is social technology. It scales trust past that ceiling of 150 people our small band brains were built for. It lets a farmer trade with a stranger in another village. A king rules people he'll never meet. Without these moralizing gods watching from above, civilization on this scale might not have worked at all. That's a wild thought. The temples aren't just decoration on top of society. They may be scaffolding. They might be part of what holds it up. So were the gods real or a useful mind trick? Here's the honest answer scientists tend to land on. Yes, ancient humans believed, deeply, but differently than we do. There was no doctrine, no book, no membership card. Belief wasn't a category you were in or out of. It was more like the weather, just there, in the trees, in the fire, in a grandmother's voice. Belief is older than farming, older than writing, older than cities, older than the will itself actually. Based on Neanderthal graves and our own brain wiring, it's probably older than our species itself entirely. Some form of reaching toward the invisible has been with us since before we were fully human. Which flips the whole question. The interesting thing isn't when belief started, it's why it never stopped. You and I live in a world drowning in science, satellites and search engines. We know so much. We know what lightning is. We know what causes earthquakes. The sun's a ball of gas, not a chariot. And yet, billions of people right now believe in something real to them. Quiet, everyday, ordinary belief. Even atheists, skeptics, the just spiritual crowd, still knock on wood, still avoid the number 13, still feel watched in an empty house, still feel someone they lost is somehow with them still. Which leaves one quiet, awkward question for you and me. Modern brains are still running ancient software. That HADD circuit, the one that throws your ancestor at a rustle, sits behind your eyes right now. It's why you see faces in clouds. It's why a shadow in the hallway makes your heart jump. It's why a house can feel haunted even when you know intellectually that it really isn't. Atheists and believers share the same wiring. That's not an insult to either side. It's just biology. The brain wondering if there's a God and the brain certain there isn't are the same pattern detection engine. Belief isn't a bug in the human mind. It's a feature that let a soft, slow ape survive. It's what let strangers cooperate. It's what let people sit next to a dying friend and whisper comfort. Nobody said that around a mammoth carcass by pure logic. Somebody said it because they felt something bigger.
Imagine you're a hunter in the dark, 20,000 years ago. The fire is low, the wind moving. You hear something breathing that isn't the person next to you. Would you not feel it too, honestly? Would part of you not reach into that dark, hoping something out there was on your side? That reach is the beginning of every god humans have ever imagined. not fear alone, not stupidity. A small, brave gesture from a self-aware creature that just realized how alone it is under stars. And that leads to a stranger question, one I really want to open up with you next. If belief grew from our fears and loves and pattern matching, then, in a real sense, we invented the gods. But once we did, they turned around and shaped us, our laws, our cities, our sense of self. Maybe the honest question isn't whether we invented them. What if the gods invented us right back? What if the story runs both ways, and we've been shaping each other for thousands of years?
I want to pull on that thread in the next video, because it opens up a much older mystery, where myths themselves come from, and why the same stories keep appearing on continents that never once met. If you're the kind of person who likes questions like this, subscribe. I don't do hype around here. I just explain the stuff I'm actually curious about, out loud, so we can be curious together. Subscribe. The next weird question is already